a simple hydrogen atom. Now, as you get more and more complicated atoms with higher and higher atomic numbers, you get more and more complicated and more organized energy formations in them. So this is, this is key. So God said He made light first by speaking, and then God made the matter from the light by putting more information in. So the whole first week of creation, God is actually putting in logos all the way along. So interestingly enough, energy first, plus information, God makes matter. Matter, then God puts information into it, and He makes life. Very scientific. And nobody would have really known that until the 20th century. So, how long would it take to put an idea that is in the mind of God, in eternity, outside of space and time, into time? So we can talk. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this a little bit next. I'm going to go into the dimension theory, but God is in eternity. He's not limited by our three dimensions. And if you can imagine, let me go down here because this will probably be a little helpful here.
So in effect, with all this, being able to look at scientific laws and how they're organized and structured, the surprise effect would be that anyone would come up with the theory of evolution and it just randomly coming together on its own then.
What?
That's almost, to me, that's surprising because,
That is surprising.
you know,
Yes.
that's,
Well, I think we're gonna look a little bit later that people actually do know. They're just, as Romans
willingly
1
ignorant.
says, they're suppressing what they know. So here's Edwin Abbott, 1884. So this is 140 years ago, right? He wrote this book called. It's a popular book that people in mathematics anyway read. My mother gave it to me. This is before I was a Christian. She said, "I'll read this," and it was kind of interesting. I didn't know what it related to, but it's fascinating because he did. This is a little. It's kind of a little fairy tale just to understand mathematics. It's kind of fun. You can read it, but there's these characters that live on. There's these characters that are just one-dimensional. They're points. And then there's other beings or characters in the book that are two-dimensional. They live on a line, right? And they can be a man or a boy, a woman. A woman is a dot on the line, and a man is a dash, and all these things. But they live in two dimensions. So, but then there's these creatures that live in three. These live in one dimension. They're on the line, so they live in one dimension. Then there's these creatures that live in two-dimensional world. They can be triangles or squares or circles, but they live in this plane, right? This two-dimensional plane, and they interact with each other. And they have this life that the interaction. He describes this life and kind of what they do. Now, all of a sudden, something appears out of nowhere. A circle appears in their two-dimensional world out of nowhere. And they have all this discussion and trying to understand where did this come from, and I don't believe it could possibly happen, and there it is, and it did happen. All of a sudden it just appears out of nowhere because the circle is an intersection of a three-dimensional being, which is a sphere. When it intersects the circle, the plane of their existence, it appears as a circle. And so there's talking about, it was no dream, from the depths of nowhere came forth a hollow voice, close to my heart, am I quite gone? Are you convinced now? And they're talking to each other about this amazing phenomena that seems to make no sense, that can't possibly happen. In their world, it's a miracle. So this is three dimensions. This is a way of just understanding how, if we were in more dimensions or less dimensions, what it would be like to us. Now, God is in more than our three-dimensional world. Actually, we have four dimensions. Everything can be described in four dimensions: time, height, length, and depth. Everything's described in those dimensions. So that E equals mc squared, force equals mass times acceleration, all those things, those are all defined by 4 dimensions. Now what if there are more dimensions than 4? There's no reason to think there aren't. And most physicists believe that there's many more dimensions. Stephen Hawking said there's 11 dimensions, at least 11. I don't think we know how many dimensions there are. But it's easy to think that there could be many, many dimensions. And God is, if you think of God as getting an understanding, if you want to get an understanding of anything, you want to get an understanding of history, of chemistry, of physics, of psychology, you want to get an understanding of everything, you want to have, sort of, if you want to understand history, you only have the past, and it's kind of faint, you have the present, but you have nothing of the future. If you want to get an understanding of history, you'd want to have an all-seeing eye that can see the whole thing together and make sense of it. And God is in eternity. It's his best way of saying he's outside of time somehow. He's above time. We have this thing in fairy tales a little bit, a hint of that. Once upon a time. Out somewhere outside of time. Somewhere else. Well, the story of the Bible and the story of the incarnation is about the creator and God of the universe coming from somewhere else, some other dimensional reality. Probably, maybe God's in infinite dimensions. Like, we'll never even exhaust his infinite dimensionality. And he can see the whole thing. Now, we can't really understand that. How can you see the whole thing at once? We're using something that's time. At once, how can you see all of time at once at the same time without determining what's going to happen and predicting? How can you see it? It's not really, it's beyond our comprehension, because we're like these two-dimensional beings. We can only by analogy sort of understand that. So, this is very important. So I'm going to go back to where we were. Okay. So, how long would it take? Again, how long would it take to take an idea from the mind of God and put it into time and space? Anybody? How long would that take?
You couldn't even determine, because it could happen in a nanosecond.
Right. As soon as it's in the time, it's in the time. So it really wouldn't take any time at all. So, interestingly enough, the 6 days of creation, why did God take 6 days? He had ideas in his mind whenever he put them into time. I mean, it wouldn't really take any time for him to take things in eternity and put them into time. As soon as they were in time, that's in an instant. He took 6 days. Why did he take 6 days?
Because we're going to have days, and so he wants us to understand it.
I guess God set some pattern. You know, it's very interesting because the year is set by the sun, by the earth going around the sun, right? And the day is based on an astronomical occurrence of the Earth's rotation, 1 rotation per day, right? And the month is based roughly on the moon going around the Earth. That's a month. So where does the week come from? And in almost every culture across the world, the week is 7 days. Why is that? It's not related to any astronomical feature. Why is it 7? Very interesting question. I think it's because it goes back to the beginning, and all of humanity comes from the same original human beings who came from, basically God made them in 7 days. It's very interesting. What's that?
Even more mind-blowing is when you get into I'm sure you've heard of the term sacred geometry. Well, if you go into Hebrew, the Hebrew language, numbers all have meanings. So the year, we have 365 days. 3, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. 6, the day man was created. 6, also the day Christ was crucified on the cross. And 5 is the number of grace. 365 days in a year. How many months are in a year? We have 12. You know, it's another number that has a meaning, 12 apostles or whatnot. You know, so when you look at it, everything in creation, including the Fibonacci sequence, the number of weeks, 70, number of completion, all these numbers are all numbers that have these meanings that point to God's glory. So it's like, even in math, it's mind-blowing. It's like everything was structured and designed not only to fit the exact purpose, but also to explain it and explain God's personality and his character within that person. It's
Thank you.
incredible.
Thank you, Benjamin. Good point. Actually, C.S. Lewis said there's as many apologetics as there are facts in the world. So we can look in every corner and we can find things that point to God and glorify him. So this is a point that is very powerful to make to individuals when I'm talking to them and I get to this point. I say, because it's personal. This is not just abstract. You are planned. You have a purpose. You have a meaning. God thought intimately and personally about you. Just you. You were a thought in God's mind. He planned you. He thought in detail about you.